Thanks for joining us. Welcome to Live Free, Ride Free. I'm your host, Rupert Isaacson, New York Times bestselling author of The Horse Boy and The Long Ride Home. Before I jump in with today's guest, I want to say a huge thank you to you, our audience, for helping to make this happen. I have a request. If you like what we do here, please give it a thumbs up, like, subscribe, tell a friend. It really, really helps us to make the progress. To find out about our certification courses, online video libraries, books, and other courses, please go to rupertisaacson.com. So now let's jump in. Welcome back to Live Free, Ride Free. I've got Amanda Atkins, who is the author of How to Handle More Than You Can Handle. I know a lot of us listening to this will know exactly or resonate exactly with that title. I know I do, being the father of an autistic son. Overwhelms are us. So it's good to be able to talk about it squarely, because then it allows one to think about what might we do? How might we end the feelings of isolation? Some people feel shame. Some people feel all sorts of things. But I know that for me, in the early years, particularly, isolation was the thing. Because if you have the kid who's taking their clothes off and pooping on the floor of the supermarket at the checkout counter, you sort of avoid going, and this, begins to snowball. And there's so many parents out there in this kind of position. So this book that Amanda has written is a very valuable thing. So Amanda, thank you for coming on the show. Please tell us, a bit about who you are and why did you write this book?
Well, thanks for having me. And as I was listening to your audiobook recently and could just resonate with so much of what you said about the early years. And, you beautifully articulated your anger and your rage and all the complicated feelings that it feels like good parents aren't allowed to have. And so, from that sentiment is sort of where my book was birthed. I was 26 when I had Asher, fresh out of grad school. In hindsight, feels like I was a baby at the time. 26, it feels so young to have this really high needs child. Had just graduated with my shiny new master's degree from Northwestern University and really felt like, okay, like I'm on top of the world. I'm ready to start my career. I've done everything right. I've checked all the boxes, and then gave birth to a son with a 1 in 20,000 syndrome, Prader Willi syndrome. And this particular syndrome is all encompassing. It's cognitive delays, physical delays. And if you were to Google it, the thing that you'll read right off the bat is what's called insatiable hunger. So,
Yeah.
meaning the part of his brain that doesn't that registers hunger, hypothalamus, doesn't work properly for him. Or rather, I should say the part of his brain that registers fullness. So Asher lives with a feeling of hunger all the time. Throw in a healthy dose of OCD and some pretty intense rigidity and perseveration. And, food really kind of consumes our life, meaning that a lot of people with PWS, their families lock up the refrigerator, you know, things like dog food, toothpaste, anything remotely edible can
Mm.
instantly become a threat. And so, imagine being handed your, baby and told that this is the future, right? And so really early on, I felt so conflicted because I felt like the expectation was that I should be this special needs warrior. I should
Right.
wear the ribbon of PWS. I should go to the 5Ks. I should raise money. And just really early on, it felt like I felt so resistant to my identity being taken over by
Mm.
this. And
Especially at
the
26. Yeah.
irony, the irony now that here we are both talking about what it means to parent a child with a disability. In some ways, my identity has become consumed with
Yeah.
it, but I like to think it's in my own way. So anyway, so early on, I just felt such resistance I felt that people really did not know how to respond when I said I was struggling. When I said, we've had a really hard day or we're in a really hard stretch, I'm really struggling emotionally. People always felt the need to meet that with, oh, but you guys are such good parents for Asher. Or, kids are so resilient. Or, the phrase from the title of the book, God won't give you more than you can handle. Anything religious, was thrown onto it, of course. And so I sort of felt
Mm.
like this is actually more than I can handle. Like, I feel like every part of my life is being touched by this, my friendships, my marriage, my career, my decision to have more children. All of it feels like it's just imploding under the pressure of this experience of parenting such a high need child. And so I felt like there needed to be space for parents and caregivers to talk about how hard this is in
Mm.
a way that you don't have to throw the caveat, but I really love my child, right? Because of course I love my child. Like, of course I love him exactly as he is, but would I change it if I could? Might, and I feel like
Mm.
there's not a lot of room for us to say that as parents. So that the book kind of came out of that place, and I really felt the need to touch on our identity as parents, and that we're allowed to have an identity that's more than just a caretaker, because I feel like a lot of parents really struggle to pursue anything other than anything that involves their child. And I want parents to know that, like, number one, your life's not over, but you have to work at it. You have to work at it.
Well, you're a family therapist,
Mhm.
and you've got a pretty, burgeoning practice. Were you, was that as a result of becoming a special needs mum, or were you already heading for that route before you, like, was that what you were going to be anyway?
Well, that's a good question because I think in some ways my career is a constant like urge to like overcompensate for the lost time. Like it almost feels like, there was a moment where I was like, oh, I'm never going to work. Like I'm going to be a stay-at-home parent forever. This isn't what, I I got this training. I'm really passionate about being a therapist, but I was a stay-at-home mom for 3 years, so not an incredibly long time, but long enough in the beginning to where it felt like I'm really behind in my
Mm.
career. And so I think once I was able to kind of get my feet under me, I really felt like, wow, I really want to run with this. I really want to grow this practice. So I wouldn't say it was necessarily a result of having a child with a disability, but it kind of that I realized I wanted to have
Right, but it
a
wasn't where
booming
you were going
career.
after grad school before you had Asher.
No, 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 no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What? So
yeah.
what were you hoping to be? What did you come at? What was your master's in?
Well, I was in grad school after I was going to be a therapist by the time Asher was born. I knew I wanted to be a therapist, but I don't think that I ever saw myself in this niche of like working with caregivers, that's for sure. I've always had an interest in grief. That's always been kind of my primary interest. So,
Why?
you know,
Why is that been your interest?
I think there's something there about how this something can happen to you and it never goes away. Like it changes you forever. Grief is something that we're all going to experience, whether like I'm talking about grief from like the death of a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that's going to happen to all of us. So it's not unique to you or to me, but it's something that's so life-changing.
Mm.
There's no way to like get out of it easily, I guess. And that's always struck me because it's like none of us are immune to it. And it's just something that's so profoundly impactful to all of us.
Okay, yeah, but when I was at university, I wasn't thinking about doing anything like that. Why do you think, as a young woman, a late adolescent woman, why were you? Was there a family story that?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So what
Okay,
got you
right.
so interested
Okay.
in grief? Yeah.
Hey, you could be a therapist. Okay, you're good at this. All right. So when I was in high school, my best friend, though there's a big group of us that were all hanging out at the lake, and my best friend at the time, her boyfriend said he wasn't feeling well, so he went into the bathroom and he ended up collapsing. And we were 16 years old. 911 was called. Bunch of my friends were trying to give CPR and everything, and he ended up basically he had an asthma attack and he died, and it was this just insane experience of being like, "Oh my gosh, someone's alive, just someone's dead," and I was her best friend, and so I was in this position of, like, caretaking for her, listening to her. I mean, I went home with her that night, and I remember, like, putting pictures of him upside down. She asked me to do it, and so I just sort of, like, got put in this almost, like, therapist role of caretaking
Hmm.
for my best friend right after her boyfriend died, and just kind of walking through that grief process with her made me really not afraid of it. It made me not afraid of grieving people and feeling like I could sort of walk into that experience as someone who had experienced this big loss.
Interesting. Yeah. How did she, I presume because she was quite young and they had not
Mhm.
been together very long, I should
Yeah,
imagine that at a certain point she did move on.
absolutely. Yeah.
And, why though, in that case, did you think it stayed with you? What made you think, yeah, I kind of want to pursue a career here?
I think I just felt so comfortable with it. I noticed a lot of other people weren't quite sure the right thing to say to her or maybe didn't bring it up at all. And I never felt scared of the topic of talking about pain,
Mm.
I guess. It felt very comfortable to me and I never was afraid of it.
Was that, talk to me about your own family background, your parents. Were they people who would talk very openly about this sort of thing, for example?
No, that's the irony of just me being a therapist is that I come from a family that it uses humor. It's all humor. It's all crude humor, like it's
Oh,
fun.
it fit right in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Such a fun family. But when it comes to vulnerability or more
Yeah.
tender or raw emotions, there's no expression of it at all. And so I almost feel like, I don't know, it almost felt like I was so needed an outlet to face hard feelings and discomfort that I like maybe looked for it in other or I don't know if I looked for it in other people, but I wanted to give a voice to it because it was something in my family of origin that was never like freely talked about.
And was it something that needed to be talked about? Like there were all these elephants in the room, or not
Not
even?
It was just more subtle than that. That's like my family is it's the kind even like in writing a book, right? Like my parents, they're still married, in their 70s. They listened to the audiobook and they were like, We're really proud of you." I was like, "That's probably the first time I've ever heard we're proud of you."
That's
Or,
great because I've never heard it from my
yeah,
parents.
well, it took yeah, yeah, and you've written a book too. Come on, what more can we do? That's not fair. Yeah, so I mean, that's it. There's no every now and again they'll say, "How many copies?" My mom said, "How many copies have you sold?" I told her and she said, "That's it."
My answer to that is always both of them.
Good. Okay, I'm gonna use that from
Yeah,
now on. I'm
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
use
yeah.
that. So, it's just I don't know. I don't know. I don't exactly know. My mom's mom had a disability. She had a limb difference. And
Uh-huh.
so I sort of have this, and that was like in the 50s. And so
Okay.
I have this, she only had one arm. And
Ah,
I contribute some of my mom's discomfort about talking about hard things is I wonder if her mom really modeled like, we don't talk about differences, just get back on the horse, buck up, like, you know,
that would seem likely from that
right?
generation.
In
Yeah,
the 50s, it's like, yeah, I have a difference. Yes, I could wallow in it, but I'm not going to. We just got to keep going. So
yeah.
I think that's probably messaging that was passed down through the
Mm,
years. My dad was in the Vietnam War. His family was really poor. Lots of, it's just like
yeah.
lots of messaging around like what does it really mean to suffer? What is worth talking about in suffering? Like surely suffering and your feelings, it's like not that important when it's like
Well,
there's much other
but
things.
it is interesting though that the generations that came through the Depression and World War II, they had to simply cope
That's right.
in a way that I think is unimaginable for
Yes.
our generation. And I would posit that that kind of jocular stoicism was probably the best tool
Yeah.
because when you're dealing with, I mean, obviously the experience of World War II, for example, for the Americans was very different to the Europeans in that
Mm.
it wasn't it didn't impact civilians except for the fact that their boys were killed, but the cities were not being destroyed, women were not being raped, but babies were not being bayoneted, like within America. That, of course, all happened in Europe. But I do have a great respect, I think, for the place of that kind of jocular stoicism, because I think it does also build resilience. And it's becoming so cliched at the moment, but I think that I observe that the current young adult generation is less resilient palpably than mine was, and I'm probably half a generation on from you. So it seems that there's been a kind of diminishment of resilience. So I have really mixed feelings about the let's talk it all out thing.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
because I'm absolutely can see both points of view. So I end up doing both,
Yeah. Yeah.
And as you say, I wrote a couple of books about my own experience and definitely put my own feelings in there. And at the same time, there's an awful lot of toilet humor,
Hmm.
because that's what gets you through.
I
And in
agree.
fact, the toilet humor actually got us up the mountain, you know, to the shaman in Siberia where nothing else,
Yeah.
you know,
That's right.
gods of
That's
humor,
right.
toilet humor saved us. And actually, when I'm doing trainings for our therapeutic approaches, I actually school people in toilet humor for very specific reasons because, a lot of the kids who we're dealing with are what I call therapied out. If
Mm.
you're a child and you're being told every day for your whole childhood, basically, you need therapy. You're just getting a message saying you're not right.
Yeah.
And this erodes your self-respect. And the only way you can reestablish your self-respect if you've lost it is some sort of act of rebellion.
Hmm.
And of course, toilet humor is by its very nature an act of rebellion.
Hmm.
So the moment you start talking about poo, you give a safe outlet for this person to rebel.
Yeah.
So there's a restoration of self-respect. And then, of
Mm.
course, we're using it in the educational context. So you can teach all the natural sciences through poo,
That's right. That's
and
right.
I'll never reduce anything. And it's funny. I mean, and if you pretend it's not funny, then the child, particularly kids, will know that you're full of that thing that you're saying is not funny.
Uh-huh.
And
So
so
true.
it's God's free joke stuff that comes out of your ass. It's funny. It just is. There's no way around it. So, but at the same time, you're absolutely right that there is also a point at which things must be addressed. And what one is looking for is that happy medium. So in your
Yeah.
book, how are you treading in your approach as a therapist? How are you treading the line of that happy medium? Because yeah, it's tempting to go all out into a woe is me fest. And there are
Yeah.
sometimes when one needs to put a tear in your beer kind of thing. But
Right.
what talk to us about how you help people find that middle line, if indeed you do, or and if you don't, what do you do?
Yeah. I think humor is a huge part of my work often, and I think it is so helpful. I sit down with somebody who's maybe very nervous or they have a lot of emotion, they're feeling really sad, and humor just instantly lightens the energy. It just
Yeah.
instantly puts them at ease
It's
and shows
medicine.
them it is, and shows them that I'm a real person.
Mm,
Like I'm not judging them, or we have to find light in these situations,
right.
even on the hardest
You
day.
don't laugh,
And
you'll cry, love, innit? That's the,
exactly.
yeah.
I always know I'm really in trouble when I sit down with a client that I feel like can't access humor, when I feel like they're totally stuck
Yeah.
in the sadness. And that does happen once in a while, and I feel very out of my element. That's when I'm like, okay, we gotta think bigger picture here. Like,
Do you
yeah.
automatically start making poo jokes?
I something, anything. Yeah. I
Yeah.
just and if they don't take the bait, I'm just like, oh no, I'm in trouble. What am I gonna do here? But because
Yeah,
usually you just feel a lightness when you make a joke and somebody, whether it's a little self-deprecating or whatever it is, it just
indeed.
helps.
Well, it's also bonding, right?
Bonding,
It's
exactly.
the common humanity thing.
That's right.
Let's go through this together.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you a couple of questions about Asher. So, how's he doing now? You told me he's 16, and
Yeah.
I know various people with Prader-Willi, so I know that
Oh,
I know that it can present quite differently.
yeah. Yeah.
How's it presented with him?
Overall, he really is doing well. He's a happy kid. He's in good health for the most part. He's active. For the biggest thing that we struggle with it is like sort of like obsessions
Yeah.
and schedule and perseveration and like, that kind of thing. So it's really difficult. Like this past
Can you
weekend we were
define
visiting.
perseveration for those listeners
Yeah.
who
So like,
don't?
yeah. So basically like focusing on the same thing over and over and over.
Yeah.
So for him, it's
Getting into a
always
loop. Yeah.
exactly, it's like schedule or like, there's certain podcasts he likes to listen to, like the new podcast come out today. I have to listen to it right now. Or, like just things that are like part of his routine. And if
Mm.
there's any deviation from it, we're kind of in trouble. So it's really hard for our family to be flexible. Vacations are really hard. We do it, but everything's loaded and difficult. So yeah, but on the whole, he really is doing quite well. He can read, he can write, you know, he is verbal. He's just Asher.
How is he presenting when it comes to the eating disorder?
Yeah, the food thing is tricky. He definitely the one of the tricky things about Asher is he's tall and he's quite thin. He's like
Mm.
5'7" and he's like 115 pounds. So people
Okay.
don't necessarily, yeah, so
So
he's
he's
very
not
thin.
presenting as obese at all.
He's
Yeah.
not. He's not. And we've known about
And
his
is that
diagnosis
because
since
you are controlling things quite tightly?
yes. Yes. And since the day we got his diagnosis, we've had a tight control on it. It's tricky because other people look at that and they think, oh, like
Yeah.
he can eat whatever. And but the reason he is that size is because we've worked hard to keep him that way. So he will sneak food. He definitely will, if there's something that he wants, he will try and sneak it. He can eat a lot at one time. So it's just like a constant
What about the
battle.
dangerous stuff though, like medications, toothpaste,
He really is
dog
good with that.
food?
The only thing that you kind of have to watch him with is toothpaste. He does like to eat is he likes to eat toothpaste if you don't watch him. But other than that, he is safe for the yeah. I just got to keep an eye on him, kind of thing.
Why
But
do you
yeah,
think why do you think his eating has been more manageable for you guys or for him?
I have no idea, and I would never even begin to assume it's anything I've done. I really don't. I think it's genetic. I think there's like so much genetic just stuff about PWS that we don't. I even feel like I've told my husband this before. Like, I don't even think hunger is the right word. I think it's an obsession. I think hunger is not the right category for what they feel. I think it's perseveration, obsession. I could be
Mm.
wrong. Other PWS families might disagree, but with me, Asher's not, it's like Asher has a fixation on it, but he has a fixation on a lot of things,
What are
if
his
that
other
makes sense.
fixations? Yeah.
Oh my gosh, like certain TV shows that he's obsessed with, the bus, he loves riding the bus to school every morning. Like what time is the bus coming? What time is this? What time is this? Very schedule oriented. Do I have speech therapy tomorrow night? Yeah, that kind of
I
thing.
what I that I sure I get, but I'm going more for what is passionate interests? What are the
Oh,
things that
passionate
light him up?
interests. He loves Zoom calls. Like, he loves
Okay.
scheduling Zoom calls and doing them.
With
Honestly, that's
who?
probably he has these two friends, Clara and Elle. Of course, they're like girls. And he loves doing Zoom calls. So that's his favorite thing, to send them the link and then have them get on it and then just
And
connection.
are they special needs as well, or are they
No, they're not.
neurotypical?
They're neurotypical.
And then will he talk once he's on the call with them? Will he talk over and over about the same thing, or is it actually pretty much a back and forth conversation? Will he ask about them, or is he talking about himself?
I'm really trying to get him every time we do a Zoom, I'm saying, hey, let's come up with 3 questions we can ask ahead of time. Because it's otherwise this really is just kind of one way. And I like the social
Yeah.
butterfly in me just wants to be like, do it. But then I'm trying to be like, he loves it, let him do his thing. It's okay.
And when he's talking to these girls about himself,
Yeah.
what is he relating? What's he talking about?
He's saying, like, have you ever seen the show Big Bang Theory?
He no, but I have seen Young Sheldon, so
Oh, it's Young
so-
Sheldon. That's the show I'm talking about. Oh my gosh,
okay,
Asher
yeah,
is,
yeah,
I was gonna say it's the spinoff. Most people don't know Young Sheldon.
yeah.
Asher is obsessed with Young Sheldon. It's
Okay,
like
well, that's kind of a good thing to be obsessed by. Yeah,
it is, exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So he watches it. Well, it's over now, but he watched it, and he watches reruns, and now he watches the George and Mandy, the like spinoff of it. There's like another spinoff of Young Sheldon that he watches. And so one of his friends has also started watching the show. So that's what they talk about.
Who were George and Mandy on Young Sheldon
George
now?
and Mandy it's Sheldon's brother,
Okay,
George,
the rock
and the
and
girlfriend
roller.
Mandy.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
okay,
Yeah. So
all
it's now a
right.
spinoff.
I could see that though because we went through like as a family this summer a whole like 2 months of watching Young Sheldon, and I was watching it with my two younger kids, and they
Yeah.
they were learning so much about American life through that show.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
really?
yeah. So
Oh, because it's like
so
set in
that
the
shows to
South.
me
Yeah.
that Asher has quite good discernment
Yeah.
because it's a very philosophical show. Does he get that he sort of is young Sheldon?
I don't know. That's what I've always wondered. I'm like, is that why he's drawn to it? Because Sheldon, I don't
He
know.
doesn't articulate that.
He doesn't seem to articulate it, but I do wonder that as well. Yeah.
And then how did he make these two friends, these two girlfriends?
They're friends from grade school and they just, there was like a best buddies program. So like where the regular ed kids were connected with the kids in special
Yeah.
ed and they just connected through that and he stayed in touch. They go to different schools now, but they've all stayed in
And
touch,
they've
which is
stuck
really
with it.
sweet. Yeah,
Good
they're
for them.
super sweet girls. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, awesome.
That's unusual. Because my
Yeah.
son, when he went off to high school, we homeschooled for about 10 years, and then he went off for his last 2, 3 years into high school. And there was a Best Buddies program, but I wouldn't say that the people who were in that really, I mean, how could they follow through? They were young as well.
Right. Right.
You would certainly wouldn't put any judgments on that, but I'm impressed that so
Yeah.
he must have a lot of charm.
He really
That
does
show.
have a lot of charm and he's funny. He's super funny. He has a great sense of humor. He's a funny
Can you give
kid
me an
for sure.
example?
Oh my gosh, it's all gonna be so embarrassing to me because it's all directed towards me. But like yesterday, we were out somewhere and we were with a big group of people and he saw Chipotle, the restaurant Chipotle,
Yeah, yeah.
and he looks at me and we're with this big group of people and he goes, "Mom, whenever you eat Chipotle, you fart." In front of this big, and then he's laughing and pointing at me, and I'm just like, Asher, can you like we're in can you like he just knows how to like make fun of me and loves like kind of like the, like, yeah, mom makes you fart, doesn't it? It's just like, oh, why did I ever tell you that?
But that means that the autistic side of his Prader-Willi, because again, for those listeners and viewers who don't know Prader-Willi, it comes with cognitive,
Yep.
let's say, deficits as well. But these are on a huge spectrum.
Yeah.
But if he is making those jokes at your expense, that shows that he has a sense of perspective, theory of mind, and irony, which is
Mm,
putting him like way on the upper scale,
that's
right?
right. Yeah,
Um,
that's such a good
if you
point.
get if somebody teases you, it means that they have gone through that crucial milestone of theory of mind and false belief. And again,
Yeah.
for listeners who don't know that, what that is this is a bit of a holy grail if you're sort of an autism parent, that in neurotypical kids, somewhere around 2.5 to 3, let's say your kid loves horses and is looking at a magazine with a horse picture and it goes, "Look, mummy, a horsey," and they hold it up, but they're looking at it. They sort of think you can see what they see, even though they can't.
Mm,
And then somewhere around 2.5 to 3, the brain will go through this development called theory of mind and false belief, where they will turn it around and go, "Look, mummy, a horsey." They know that you see something different to what they see. And we, in the work that we do with Horseboy Method and Movement Method, have all these methods for kind of kick-starting theory of mind, because we've
mm,
realized that if you can help someone who is challenged with that through that milestone, then the neuroplasticity really opens up and their
mm.
brain kind of starts to kind of get more and more neurotypical-esque. And it sounds
Yeah.
like even if they've had quite a severe start, nonverbal, all of that. So it sounds like Asher's really gone through that. Was there a time when he didn't have that, do you think? And can you discern when that shift happened?
It feels like, it took him a long time to be he also has apraxia of speech. So there's a lot of like speech stuff going on with him. And I think some of it was when he was able to actually like the difference of when he could articulate words versus when he couldn't, I feel like he wasn't really able to talk to where we could understand him until maybe 5 or 6. And then probably like 7, 8, 9, he started to be able to put together a few more complex ideas. He's always been a funny kid that likes humor and likes teasing, I would say. Even before he was very playful and liked to tease and that kind of thing. And probably because it's a lot of our energy in the house. We have a very silly, funny household, but I feel like maybe let's say when he was probably 9 or 10, I would say maybe he was able to start like making more like directed kind of like jokes and teasing and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking about the Prader Willi kid that I know best.
Mm,
He is a child in Germany, actually. And I met him when he was 4. And he had quite a severely autistic presentation. Like
Yeah.
Asher, he wasn't fat.
Yeah.
He was quite a skinny kid, product of 2 tall, skinny parents. However, they also, like you were saying, managed it very, very carefully.
Yeah.
And it's very tough in Germany, because Germany's a very sugar friendly culture,
Oh, interesting. Yeah, yeah.
and baked goods and that sort of, and it's a way that
Yeah,
people show love and affection is by
that's
giving
right.
this. So it's very tough, and he's had a very tough time in school and so on. But I was doing equine therapy with him, and he was heading for hospital to have his hips opened up. He
Mm,
had, yeah, again, for those listeners that are unfamiliar, there can be all these physical things that go with
that's
Prader-Willi
right.
as well, including sort of very tight, malformed hips, etc. And he, through all the time on the horse, didn't need the surgery. And the doctor's like, what are you guys doing? You've done something. And they said, well, we've been doing this horse thing. And well, it worked for him. And because he could then hang out at the barn, there were other kids. And
Mm,
he went from being a very isolated kid to a somewhat socialized kid. And
mm.
now the last time I met him, I was like, you're actually really doing quite well. And he was starting to do that. He's about 10 now, 11,
Okay.
also starting to tease me a bit. And
Yeah, yeah.
I was like, well, this is a good sign.
I love that.
So would you say, I've read some of those parts of your book where you talk about the early overwhelm, because he was very premature. He was in
Hmm.
the ICU. You were disenfranchised as a mum because,
Hmm.
you couldn't care for your kid. You didn't know if he's going to make it. Then he makes it, but now he's got this fucking thing. And you realize this thing is going to put a boot through your forehead, you know,
Yeah.
and your husband's forehead and everything else. Do you still feel that same sense of overwhelm? Or are you through that, do you think? Or do
I
you
think
just
I'm through it. I really do think I'm through it at this point. I mean, it comes and goes, right? Like I have different levels of fear. I think about the future, like what's the future going to look like for him?
yeah.
What's it going to look like for our family? But I do have a more of a sense of like stability now than I used to. Like I feel, and maybe it's because I'm rooted in my career and who I am. I'm not in my 20s. I'm in my 40s now. I feel more rooted as a person as well. And have seen a little bit how life has shaken out a little bit. There's still lots of unknowns, but
What do you think will be his future long term?
I
Well,
do
after you're
think that
dead, basically.
yeah, yeah. I think the plan is to have him in a residential home, maybe to start a residential home for some people with PWS. Yeah, I think that's sort of where that would be the ideal. There's enough people in the Chicago community with kids about Asher's age that will
To be
need
perfectly
long-term
honest,
care.
you're going to have to do that.
That seems what it seems like. Yeah.
Right. And do you feel a sense of relief that he now has siblings?
I do, but also I'm so hyper aware of not putting expectations that like I don't
Yeah, but
just
sod
worry
that.
about
If he didn't have them, he'd
yes.
be all by himself.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes. Yes.
if he's got
Yes.
people who've got his back,
Yes.
this does make a huge
Definitely.
difference.
Yes.
I asked these questions because these were the things that went through my mind. And when my son was, right up until 13, he didn't have siblings.
Yeah.
And this kept me awake at night.
So are
And
his siblings full siblings or half
no, they're half
siblings?
siblings.
That bother you at all? Or does that feel any different way or no?
No, no. And in
Okay,
fact, in,
okay.
in some ways, it worked out beautifully because we couldn't have coped, his mum and I, in those early years because anyway, we were later parents, so she wasn't going to have another child.
Mm,
But it was so severe, it was so all encompassing that we just couldn't have done it. So then when he ended up with siblings at 13, there was this part of me that went, oh, that's beautiful because he's had his childhood.
mm,
Now he will have siblings who are like half a generation younger. So when
yeah.
he's 80, they'll be 65.
Yeah,
You
right?
know,
That's
that does give me a sense of
wow.
yeah, after I die, there will be people who have the stamina.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, I mean, he's very, very independent.
Yeah.
He just sold his house last year and he got his own
Oh, that's awesome.
enterprise, and he lives between Europe and America, and he
Oh,
has 3 jobs, and but he's still
oh my
very
gosh.
vulnerable in many ways. And
Yeah.
he's someone that does rely upon community support. But when I was also, you said he'll probably go in a group home, and then from there you went, we'll probably have to do the group home.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got, so what I often advise people on when I'm consulting with people on special needs stuff is saying, you're either going to be a service user or a service provider. You're
Mm,
either going to be a consumer of services or you're going to
hmm.
learn how to be the service, but
Hmm.
you will be in that sphere.
Yeah,
So it's up to you, which one is it going to be?
that's right.
And for some people, they definitely would rather be a service user.
Mm.
Maybe it's because I'm a control freak, but if there's a service, I want to be the service.
Yeah, same.
So within this world of horseboy and movement method, there's many parents like me and like you who have done just that. And we're a whole network. And
Mm,
each of us does it rather differently because each of our children was a different context.
hmm.
But we all help each other and are part of an organization that can source funding and that sort of thing.
Mm,
But this has all happened organically over
of
15 years,
course.
right?
Yeah,
Because
because it had to, right?
it
Because it
had to.
had to. Yeah,
So
that's
what
right.
are your plans? What do you envisage this home, this community looking like? And what's going to be your role and what's going to be your husband's? I haven't even asked you about what your husband does, by the way. What does he
He
do? And yeah,
he is an accountant, so
okay, that's
money,
handy.
which is great. Yeah,
So you can
because
do the books,
I'm
you can do all
the
the
total
finances.
opposite of that.
Yeah, yeah,
I like to spend and I like feelings. So
yeah.
so it works.
Does he not like feeling?
Right? Exactly. It's a win-win. I don't know. I think for me the biggest thing is just simply safety. Safety and like friendship. Like that's all I want him to have. That's what feels most important to me with him. And so food safety, of course, feels important. And I don't think you can find that in your average residential home. It's just such a unique thing to PWS that it feels like that would have to be such a specialty of it. But it's important to me that he gets outside. It's important to me that he's moving his body, that he's around other
Are
people that
you
care for
looking at
him.
are you looking at precedents? Are you looking at examples of other places?
Not yet. Should I be? I should be, huh?
Oh yeah, you definitely
Oh,
should be. But make it fun.
yeah.
I could point you to some.
Okay.
And actually, if anyone is listening who's in this sort of position, one of the first things which I would really encourage people to look at are the Camp Hill communities.
Mm,
So Camp Hill is one word, and they've been around for about 100 years, since the 20s, but they're all over the world. I think they're in 40 countries or more. And they are Steiner inspired. If people know who Rudolf Steiner was, people have heard of Waldorf schools.
mm,
He was the guy that came up with Waldorf schools. He was also the guy that came up with an early form of organic farming, which is big in Germany. He came up with many cool things, but he's mostly known for the Waldorf schools. But Camp Hill was sort of inspired by his approach, but people with special needs living in rural communities that are safe havens and have their own economy. And when I was sort of looking at the early stages of Horseboy and knowing that some of these people who I was training were going to end up doing residential places, I often looked to that as a sort of a good working model that stood the test of time. And that was going to be my next question is, are you envisaging something that is rural or urban?
Well, I live in such an urban area in Chicago, so I do feel urban because I want it to be somewhat close to me. Thoughts?
Well,
If the listener could see your face.
yeah, yeah. Well, they will because it's on YouTube too.
There you
So I
go.
should have warned you.
Okay.
Put some clothes on.
Right?
As you know, if you followed any of my work, I'm an autism dad, and we have a whole career before this podcast in helping people with neurodivergence, either who are professionals in the field. Are you a therapist? Are you a caregiver? Are you a parent? Or are you somebody with neurodivergence? When my son Rowan was diagnosed with autism in 2004, I really didn't know what to do. So I reached out for mentorship, and I found it through an amazing adult autistic woman who's very famous, Dr. Temple Grandin. And she told me what to do. And it's been working so amazingly for the last 20 years that not only is my son basically independent, but we've helped countless thousands of others reach the same goal, working in schools, working at home, working in therapy settings. If you would like to learn this cutting edge neuroscience-backed approach, it's called Movement Method. You can learn it online. You can learn it very, very simply. It's almost laughably simple. The important thing is to begin. Let yourself be mentored as I was by Dr. Grandin and see what results can follow. Go to this website, newtrailslearning.com. Sign up as a gold member. Take the online Movement Method course. It's in 40 countries. Let us know how it goes for you. We really want to know. We really want to help people like me, people like you out there live their best life, to live free, ride free, see what happens. Things tend to go better if they're in the country.
Yeah.
Because nature is the habitat that the human organism is supposed to be in.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a human organism that is impacted and requires easily thrown off kilter, the fewer bad sensory triggers you can have, the better. Right. And then of course there's vulnerability. Cities are dangerous places on human terms. And so I definitely favor the rural. And then the other thing is, of course, you have cross-species stuff as well. So people are always happier actually when they're surrounded by animals and plants, because that is, again, what our species is supposed to do.
Right.
And as you know, sort of cities are somewhat adult playgrounds. But they're really designed for neurotypical adults with careers.
True. Yeah.
For kids or for people with special needs or whatever, they often don't go so well. But that doesn't mean that you necessarily have to live in that community, but you might be its director,
Right.
And it's, the reason, listeners, why we met is through our mutual friend, Leanna Tank, who's been on this show, who's one of my great heroes. And Leanna works in the group homes of Michigan with a criminally insane population, and really knows how the nervous system and the brain really work together, and what works and what doesn't. But I know we strayed a bit from your book, but this type of conversation for any parent who's got special needs, these are the conversations one has to have.
That's right.
And when I feel that we're dealing with how do we handle more than we can handle, it's by coming up with solutions.
That's right.
There is this kind of thing within therapy of saying, well, don't go into fix-it mode, just tell me, how hard it is. But I can't do that.
That's right.
Genetic is about fixing. And I've been in that situation. People say, well, just sit with your feelings for a while. I'm like, no, I'm going to go out there. And that is how I sit with my feelings. Please.
Well, and maybe,
Yeah.
And maybe you take action first and then you can reflect on your feelings.
Yeah, exactly.
The reflection's there somewhere. Yeah, but the action has to be there too. We have to, right?
And I feel if I don't start with action, then I am much more vulnerable to despair.
Yes.
But I do know that not everyone is like me. I don't know if you ever saw that. There was a really funny skit, came out about 10 or 15 years ago, and it's a boyfriend and a girlfriend, and she's saying, I've got these headaches, and she's got this nail sticking out of the front of her head. And her boyfriend says, well, you've got a nail sticking. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to just I just need you to be with me. I just need to. And he's like completely confused. And then he sort of gets it. He says, oh, that must be very hard. And she goes, yes, it is. Yes, it is. And then she turns her head because she bangs the nail on the thing. Ow, ow. And he goes, well, I could just take, no, stop trying to fix it.
It's so good.
But yeah, how do you dance that dance? Because, you're there's you personally.
Hmm.
You writing that book to some degree is taking action. You becoming a therapist was
Yeah.
taking, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just talk to me about your relationship with action versus sitting with feelings, and how's that played out for you, and how's it played out for your husband?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very action oriented person. You're right. Like writing the book came from a place of being like, I feel like I have to do something, and everybody has like a different degree of how comfortable they feel expressing emotion, acknowledging emotion. Like how you even started off our talk today, like asking about almost like my family of origin, like, what is, how were you taught to feel feelings? Were you taught to feel feelings?
Mm.
Were you taught that certain feelings were safe and acceptable and certain feelings weren't? And, you know, I think that's the starting point for me. You said you start with action. I tend to start with feelings first, understand what I'm feeling. And for me, an emotion is it's almost like a sixth sense to me. Like an emotion helps inform me on what action I need to take. Not everybody's wired that way, but for me, if I'm feeling anger about something, that's generally a sign that something feels unjust or that I feel wronged. And so that usually means I need to do something to, whether I need to talk to somebody or do something, or maybe I just need to chill and, process it a little bit. But oftentimes my emotions are like leaders for me. Maybe that's not such a good thing, but it is. And I try to have sound mind when I'm making decisions about things. But I'm definitely an action oriented person, but my feelings tend to lead me, or at least be more of a sixth sense to tell me what action I need to take.
Yeah, and I would say that's fair. And to be honest, I'd say that is me too.
Mm,
But it yeah, I feel that once I've identified them, I want to do, because that
yeah,
in itself is therapeutic. That in itself
definitely.
is healing.
Yeah, that makes
Um,
sense. That definitely I feel the same way. And sometimes doing just means going for a walk, going for a run. Like
yeah,
sometimes doing doesn't mean, you know, action like advocacy, sometimes it's just like what do I need in the realm of like whether it's self-care or just simply
yeah,
like living.
absolutely. It's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I asked about your son's passionate interests. I feel that when you're a special needs parent, you really need to look at your own, because
Yes.
they will get you through. Obviously, I like horses, so
Mhm.
if you put me around ponies, I tend to not dwell on myself and just get really
Yeah, yeah.
engaged with the pony. That is therapeutic. Everyone hopefully has their thing, but to prioritize that thing, I feel is of paramount importance when you are
Mhm.
being called upon to find resources
Mhm.
greater than the norm,
Mhm.
because you've got to draw on those resources from somewhere.
Mhm.
What is putting those resources into you? What puts the resources into you as a mum? What are your passionate interests?
Well, I also love horses. Not as much, not as, I'm not as involved as you are, but I do, if I can ever,
Okay, cool.
I do
We're
love a
pony people.
horse.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, whenever living in the city, I have to drive a little bit to be around a horse.
So this is a no-brainer. You say, well, I want to do a group home for my child in the city. Yeah, I love horses.
Yeah,
Dot dot
I
dot.
know.
Okay.
I know. I know. It's
But okay,
like,
so do you make sure that you get out to spend time with horses as much as you can?
yes, I do as much as I can. And, I'm having a hard day some days and I'm like, I just need to kiss a horse. I just need to kiss a horse. So, do what I can that weekend to make it happen. I love exercising. I love moving my body. I just recently bought it's not a Vespa, but like a Vespa, a little scooter that I like to scoot around town. And that's been super fun for me.
Yeah.
Being with friends, listening to music, writing. There's lots and lots of things that bring me joy.
Well, that was the word I was about to
Yeah.
ask you. It's joy, and
Yeah, exactly.
this is the most important thing.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
of course, when you're in that early stage, I know you write about this in your book of how you deal with the grief of the death of those dreams,
Yeah.
and also the absolute terror of what is to come.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
how am I going to meet the challenge of this? You know, because
Hmm.
I know what an idiot I am. You know, like
Hmm.
I'm not built for this. I'm not strong enough for this. I'm not, how on earth am I gonna do
Yeah.
that? And of course, then you end up doing it, But joy is, if one isn't living a joyful life, then one isn't really living. And it doesn't mean that every moment can necessarily be joyful.
That's
But if
right.
that, but if that's where one's focus is, and one places a really high value on it, then one is going to experience more of it than if one didn't, and it's going to
Yeah.
pull through. When you have your clients coming in and they are in that
Hmm.
grief, funk, terror mode, how do you help to orient them back to joy?
It's such a good question. I think that's like the most important question, honestly. And you would be shocked at how many people I meet with and I say exactly what you just asked me. What brings you joy? Where do you find meaning? And they cannot come up with an answer. They might be able to tell me what used to bring them joy or things that they like doing. But then when I say, well, when's the last time you did that? Years. When's the last time that something simple. Oh, I love going for a walk with my dog. Okay, well, how often do you do that? Well, I don't know if I really don't have time to do it between this and that. And I do understand that, like it's hard to find time for things when parents are busy, but I do firmly believe that we make time for what we want to make time for. And so I encourage parents to put it in your schedule. It takes some of the sexiness out of it when, yeah, you have to,
Sure.
you know, put it in your calendar, but who cares? Like if you look at my weekly calendar, it's like workout, horses on a Saturday. It's all in the schedule. Yes, it's not spontaneous and it's not sexy, but it's in there and I'm making it happen. And, I think really helping parents determine what is it that brings them joy? What are they passionate about? I always ask parents, where do you find your meaning in life? I mean, it sounds like such a big question, but I think it's an important question to be able to have an answer to. And also, how has this parenting journey changed you? Because I think part of where we find meaning is identifying how has this shaped me without judgment. Like it's not, oh, it's made me into a, you know, this bad way. Let's shift that to say, okay, it's made me more, yes, maybe a lot of parents will say, I've become more anxious. I've become more anxious by this parenting journey because I've realized all these bad things can happen. So, I would want to work with a parent on like, well, what does that mean? Like what do you mean to feel more? Yes, you feel worried about things. Is there another way to look at that? You feel more aware of suffering. You feel that you can now, you're now more attuned to the suffering in the world. Yes, that's a sad thing, but can we look at that and also look at that in a way that's actually helpful for humanity, helpful for people, right? You notice differences now. You're more attuned to people that are different from you. Like, isn't that a win in the grand scheme of things, So when I'm working with a parent around this, I like to help identify what is it that causes them joy, which is oftentimes, like I said, you would think that that would be an easy answer, but oftentimes, particularly for moms, I find that that is not something that people can easily answer. And number two, where are you finding meaning in your life, and what brings you meaning in life? Those are the two questions that I always want people to be able
Do
to
you
answer.
find that they can tell you what did used to bring them joy, or do some of them actually say, I've never really had anything?
People can usually tell me what used to bring them joy. Oh, I used to like going out with my friends. I used to like listening to music, but they feel so disconnected from that version of themselves.
Mm. Now, you are lucky in one big regard. You have a successful marriage, at least so far.
Yes. Yeah.
What you and I both know is that at least 80% of special needs marriages don't make the cut.
Hmm.
Now, 50% of marriages don't make the cut. So,
That's right.
oi.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, there's an awful lot of single parents out there.
Yeah.
And when that hits, then the overwhelm goes into just a whole other sphere.
Yep.
And yeah, quite likely there may not be time for much.
That's right.
When you've got someone in that position, of course, the need for the joy is even more acute
Mhm.
because the potential for burnout is so much higher.
Mhm.
What are the tools that you help people with, particularly in that situation?
Yeah. I think a big part of that is intentionally developing community.
Okay.
So it's not, yes, you're a single parent and the demands are huge, right? But that there is somebody, maybe co-parent is totally out of the picture. Maybe you have a
Mm,
horrible relationship with co-parent and you're not even willing to go to an IEP meeting with them. I don't know what the situation is, but
yeah.
where can you find community that you can find people that you can, go eat dinner with on a Sunday with their family, that they do understand your child, that you feel seen. This is not easy, for a million reasons nowadays, but I do think it's something that we have to intentionally be seeking. And, a certainly modern American culture is not structured, with community in mind. We're very
At all.
isolated. Yeah. And it's a huge problem. And so if you're not, especially like if you're non-religious, right? Because I think religious people can find it within that's I think can be a strength of people who are religious, is that they can go to their church or their synagogue or whatever and perhaps find like significant community. But in the absence of that, like, yeah, where do we go to find community? It is hard. It's really hard, especially in a city, I mean, in America, period.
So again, yeah, what are the tools? For example, yeah, I could, because I deal with this as well. I could tell you
Yeah.
some of the tools that I give,
Yeah.
because the obstacles that you just brought our attention to are very real.
Hmm.
It's one thing to say you need community; it's a whole other thing to
Hmm.
find it. So
To
how
find
do
it.
you help people to find it?
Yeah. I think that's where it comes. There's like a bravery in that,
Mm,
talking talking to another mom at school pickup, inviting a mom and her kid over for dinner some night. Like there's a lot of bravery and that's required, and planning. So if I was sitting with a parent, I might say, okay, let's go through what your schedule looks like and let's identify a few people that maybe you could start to build
okay,
relationships with. What does
okay.
communication look like with them? How do you initiate? What fears come up around that? Like do you feel nervous
Mm,
that they're not going to want, that kind of thing. So
mm.
really just like talking through, how do we build relationships in a
No,
way that's not easy?
those are very solid tools actually. That's to say, are there actually people that you can identify?
That's right.
Is there another mum who you feel that there could be a vibe with?
Yeah.
Do you see people becoming successful with this on the whole?
Yeah, I do. It's so loaded because there's so many things that go into this. It's like I can give you skills like how do we initiate hanging out with somebody? Who do you entrust to take care of your kid so that you can get time away?
Mm,
But, there's personality comes into effect, like, how are their interpersonal relationships? How are their skills? There's only so much coaching I can do there, but I think helping people be brave enough to take the first step and helping them identify what on the big picture, what's your goals? Okay, you want to have, let's say your goal is you want to have another mom in the community that you can watch their kid for a little bit and they can go do something and then they can watch your kid for a little bit and
mm.
you can go do something and have some alone time or go to class or whatever like that. Okay, well let's really break this down, and because I think people look at these situations and they feel so overwhelmed. Oh, nobody could ever watch my kid,
Yeah.
but it's like, okay, let's step into reality and let's confront this and look at it in a way and actually come up with some ideas where maybe we can help solve this problem. So it's not such a big overarching anxiety.
The majority of people that are reading your book and coming to you as clients, I presume, are mums.
That's right.
What's the percentage of dads?
Oh, I mean, I would say maybe 10% dads. There definitely are dads.
Yeah,
The book is written in a really non-gendered way, so a dad could read it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This we know it's going to be 90% women reading it, and a
Yeah.
lot of the dads who read it will be told to read it by their spouses,
That.
which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Do you get the single dads coming to you?
I don't think I've ever had a single dad come to me.
It's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I wonder where they go.
Yeah. That's a population that is on your mind, of course.
Yeah, because interestingly, within the horseboy world, there's a number of people who run really good programs, some of which are residential. And
Mm,
there's some people that you should talk to. A man called
mm,
David Doyle in Ireland,
mm,
who has started an incredible program. He uses our methods, particularly movement method, but honestly, even if he'd never run across us, he'd be doing a fantastic job. And he has this thing called step in, step down, step out. So the residential homes they're in the country and they have apartments. They're fully supported. Somebody would come in and spend a certain amount of time there, then transition to going sometimes back home and
mm,
sometimes there, to then going fully back home,
mhm.
to then, if they need to, then cycle in again, cycling in again.
Oh, that's cool.
And it's a really cool model because the families are not broken up. Everybody gets a break.
More of like a respite model, would you say?
Exactly,
Uh-huh.
exactly, exactly. But the respite being more than like a night,
Yeah.
the respite
That's
being,
great.
weeks if necessary.
That's great.
Whatever is right for that person. And his daughter is, very severe, very acute. He had to do something and he came up with
Mm,
this model. So he's one of the people I know who's really built, and now he's building them all over Ireland. And he's
mm.
got the Irish government to pay for them. And,
Oh,
and
great.
over 10 years, he's gathered all the data to show how it works and why it works and so on.
Wow.
And there are these people out there who are present. So interestingly, within horsesport, I know some real dads like this. There's another man called Henrik Berghoff in Germany who's got a son who had hydrocephalus and spina bifida and was
Oh.
told to abort the son. He and his wife
Mm.
Gitty run this incredible thing. Now, neither of them are single dads, but we also have, of course, a lot of mums who've started programs as well.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, the male population is quite lost at the moment. If you're a white male, you're automatically the bad guy, and there are a lot out there who are facing this, and quite a lot
And
of them.
what per
Go
like
ahead.
I think about like what still in the year 2025, like what permission do men have to feel, like
None.
right. That's
Let's
all what
talk
I'm
about
about.
it. Let's
So
talk about it.
that's why nobody comes to me probably.
Well,
Yeah.
because the thing is, as a bloke, you're supposed to be a sensitive bloke, but if you
Mhm.
actually show that vulnerability, there are no brownie points for it,
Yeah.
including, frankly, from women.
Yeah.
There is still a preference for the stoic male,
Mhm.
and that is just the truth.
Mm.
If it was different, I think we'd have noticed.
Mhm.
I don't necessarily even have a judgment over that. I'm not sure that that's good or bad. I think that might be just built into us a little bit.
Mhm.
But nonetheless, if those men are suffering in that particular way and are looking at decades of putting one foot in front of the other to try and make it all work, yeah, what's the plan? And I'd be interested, because I'm talking to you as a therapist, not just as an author,
Mhm.
and as a
Mhm.
special needs parent to special needs parent. Is that something which, once you've written a book, this, then you need another book. I wonder, is that going to be like your next book? Is where are the dads and what are we doing for them?
Good
Uh,
question. I mean, as of now, the next book is either going to be about siblings of kids
mm,
with disabilities or all about marriage.
yeah. Well, let's talk about marriage.
Yeah.
So I think you're quite unusual in that you've been together how long now?
20 years we've been
Yeah.
married.
And, I'm sure it's all been roses, right? But
Oof.
you are together and okay, you must have a base compatibility. This helps. I'm sure a lot of people are coming into you as special needs parents whose marriages are fracturing, and they're dealing
Yes.
with that on top of
Yeah.
it all. What are your strategies there?
Oh. it's hard. This is
Yeah.
arguably the hardest
Yeah.
because you have two individuals with completely different life experiences coming in and grieving a situation and approaching a situation differently. And both of them are spinning, trying to do the best they can for their child and for themselves. And often that leaves zero time for the relationship.
Yeah.
Zero time for intimacy or connection or,
Yeah.
communication or fun, playfulness. It's just so serious,
Even
so
sitting and having a
intense,
glass of wine together. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
impossible. And room for conflict too. We sit
Yes.
down and now I'm talking about, well, I went to this appointment and you didn't do that. There's no playfulness and there's no connection like there used to be because everything is high stakes. Everything is so high stakes,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that's just the
I
reality.
would posit that what is going on for most married couples in the special needs thing is actually something similar to what's going on for a lot of the special needs kids, because most of the special needs kids, it comes with, not all, but many, it comes with a really high anxiety level, high levels of cortisol.
Yep.
If you made it this far into the podcast, then I'm guessing you're somebody that, like me, loves to read books about not just how people have achieved self-actualization, but particularly about the relationship with nature, spirituality, life, the universe, and everything. And I'd like to draw your attention to my books. If you would like to read the story of how we even arrived here, perhaps you'd like to check out the two New York Times bestsellers, The Horseboy and The Long Ride Home, and come on an adventure with us and see what engendered, what started Live Free, Ride Free. And before we go back to the podcast, also check out The Healing Land, which tells the story of my years spent in the Kalahari with the Sun, Bushmen, hunter-gatherer people there, and all that they taught me and mentored me in and all that I learned. Come on that adventure with me. My friend Joelle Dunlap, another person you should get with, who runs Square Peg Foundation in California, does incredible work. Square pegs in round holes, everyone. So in Square Peg Foundation, everybody fits, right?
Oh, I love that.
She's a bit of a genius and also a special needs mom. We had our Horseboy Tribe Day. We're big believers in tribe, in community.
Mhm.
We're international, so it's 40 countries and people. So we try to get together every couple of years. And this year we got together in Ireland, and she was a speaker. And she made this really good point. She said, what you're dealing with, whether it's the kids or whether it's the parents, is cortisol poisoning.
Yep.
So for those listeners who don't really know that neuroscience, the part of your brain that governs fight, flight, freeze, fear, anxiety is called the amygdala, which means almond in old
Mhm.
Greek because it's shaped like an almond. And if it detects a threat, imaginary or real, that it doesn't care, it will tell your body to produce two things, adrenaline and cortisol. And cortisol is like a pair of scissors that momentarily cuts the cord between the connection between the boiler room of the brain, dealing with all the blood flow and temperature and digestion, and the front part of the brain, the CEO, wondering what's for lunch. Because you
Mm.
do not want to be wondering what's for lunch when something wants to make you lunch, or make lunch out of you. So you must act, not think. So nature's very clever. It kills brain cells. It's a neurotoxin. So that's why stress makes you sick, because it's actually a neurotoxin and it sticks around in the body all the time. And happiness feels fleeting because oxytocin, serotonin, they evaporate almost as soon as they're produced. You have to keep producing them all the
Mhm.
time to keep feeling happy, whereas cortisol sticks around. So PTSD is basically cortisol scarring in the brain.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
luckily, you can deal with it with oxytocin very quickly if you know how to produce oxytocin. That's a whole other thing. But
Mhm.
there it is. So you've got two people who are in this marriage who are kind of drowning in a vat of
Yep.
cortisol.
That's
And
right.
when you've got cortisol going around, you can't reason because you can't think.
Mhm.
So when you're having a knockdown, drag out fight with your significant other, that's not the best time to talk about your long-term investment portfolios because
Exactly.
it's just not going to make a rational decision.
That's
It's not
right. That's
brain
right.
not available, access denied for
Yep.
intellect. So that's what these people are facing. And then, of course, they go to war for these reasons. How
Mm.
do you help them?
Restoring safety is such a slow process, right? Like bringing your nervous system back to baseline. I think it starts with giving yourself permission to rest,
Mm,
lowering the expectation, like this constant need for therapy, 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 therapy. You get a 7 therapies a week and you're going to see every specialist and you're doing this. It's like,
yeah.
just be. What does it feel like to just be for a minute? You know, there's been times where and even now we're in one therapy a week for Asher. That's it. There's been times where we've had 4 or 5 therapies a week, and I just had to stop it eventually and be like, I cannot function at this level anymore, And so it's counterintuitive because we feel like we need to be doing 24/7, but I really think lowering the cortisol is by doing less and just coming back to basics. Like again, that question, what brings you joy?
Yeah.
Where can you cut? Do you real is this therapy really something that you have to do right now? Or can you take a break from it?
Yeah.
Where our kids are overscheduled and therefore we're overscheduled. And so do you have to go do all this stuff or can you find safety for a minute and let your nervous system relax a little bit so that you can actually allow yourself to feel joy? It sounds so simple, right? But I mean, in reality, this is impossible stuff to do.
Well, it's not simple when you're dealing with what you're just talking about because the
That's right.
exhaustion. I remember in the early days with Rowan before I became the therapy,
Yeah.
we were, yes, constantly driving around, spending money we didn't
Yes.
have, time we didn't have. And it was incredibly stressful. Where I was really lucky because I'm a journalist, so
Mm,
I will always ask questions. So I knew that I didn't know anything about this condition that my son had. So I thought, okay, I need a mentor
mm,
who I believe in mentorship strongly. Who is that mentor? Like, what qualities would that mentor need to have? And I coach people with this. So it was okay, that mentor needs to be an adult with autism because anybody else will have opinions but not lived experience. And
yeah.
that autism can't just be like, high functioning quirkiness a la
Yeah.
young Sheldon. It's got
Right.
to be like they had to start where my son was, non-verbal shitting their pants,
Yeah.
self-harming tantrums, like all of that. And they
Yeah.
have to have somehow made it. Who's that person?
Mm,
And actually, that person was really easy to identify. That was
mm.
Dr. Temple Grandin.
Ah, right, right, right.
So
Yeah.
she started life exactly there. She was rocking in a corner at 3, wiping her poo on the walls. They were going to
Yeah.
institutionalize her non-verbal. So I just wrote her an email and said, can I come talk to you?
Oh.
And she went, yeah. So I just
Yeah.
showed up and I sat in her office and said, how does my son become you? And she said, do 3 things. And I did them. And the
Mm.
most important one was follow the child.
Yes.
And that's why I asked about Asher's passionate interests.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why I asked about your passionate interests.
Mhm.
Because I know from experience that if I follow the passionate interests of my kid, everything else will fall into place.
Right.
But if I try to put an adult agenda on it, everything will get very complex.
Yep.
But we're told we have to put the adult agenda on,
Mhm.
you know, that the child should comply to the adult agenda.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that I think is, we were all brought up with that, weren't we? So
Yeah.
so I've, when we're doing our trainings, for example, that's the hardest skill to teach people is the follow the child piece. It sounds so
Mm.
simple. Like you said, find joy. It sounds very simple, doesn't it? But it's not because
Right.
our Judaic, cultures are not about joy. They're about suffering, punishment,
Exactly.
going to hell, paying your tithes, being
Control.
controlled. Yeah,
Control.
yeah.
Yes, because what
Fear.
I love yeah, what I love about the idea of following the child is it gives the child confidence. It gives the child a sense of self. that they learn to
Agency.
follow. Like that's
Yeah.
why it's so hard for so many of us as adults to say what brings you joy, because nobody's ever really asked us that question that cares
Yes.
about it, right? And so when we're putting our child in the position of being the leader and we're saying, I'm going to follow where you lead me and I'm going to be there to help you and mentor you and
Hmm.
shape you, it actually gives the child a sense of what brings them joy and what they want to do. And it's crazy. Kids don't even have that. They just want to sit on a screen now because that's what they're given. They've lost that sense of adventure in some ways. And so I think your method really helps them reconnect with a sense of adventure, a sense of,
Yeah, adventure,
autonomy.
exploration, play.
Yes.
These play, what's that?
Yes.
What's the old adage they say? You don't stop playing because you get old because you stop playing.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
If we parent in that follow the child way, the child doesn't allow us to stop playing.
Yeah. It's so fun and connecting. And you feel like, oh my gosh, actually like my kid. My kid's
Yeah,
funny. I want to
yeah.
spend time with them.
They're
This
actually
doesn't,
good company.
that's right. I
They're
love that.
interesting. Yes.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean sometimes you don't, get exhausted and frustrated. I
Of
get
course. Or
it.
you have to discipline from time to time. This is all real things of parenting.
Yes. But it's still, no, I so agree that what we're really presented with is an antagonism model.
Yes. Yep.
And also to tell the kid, don't be a kid. Again, I'm going to quote my friend Joel, be a pen, be a Philadelphia lawyer aged 45,
Yeah. Right.
you know? And if you
You're
don't do
right.
that, we're going to give you drugs to
Yeah.
make you that.
Yeah.
And then we'll all be miserable.
One thing I'm curious about, do you feel like having your first son have autism, do you feel like that helped you take a more relaxed approach with your other children?
100%.
Yeah, me too.
100%. Yeah.
Me too.
There's a part of me, I mean, they're not through their childhood yet, so there's
Yeah,
more to come. But, there are some things which they do, and I'm like, yeah, I'll be fine.
totally.
It'll
Like,
be
I don't care. It's
it'll
okay.
be fine.
I
Yeah.
agree.
It's like,
Just totally changes the perspective. You're like, what matters? Not
yeah,
that much.
been through some version of World War One, yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
It's all fine.
But also the other thing which I this is again, it sounds cliched, but it is worth drawing one's attention to. Childhood is very short,
Mhm.
but it sets the tone for everything. So the more one can put emphasis into making that as joyful as possible, the more joy you're going to experience as the parent, but also the more you're going to set that person up with a habit of joy.
Yeah.
And with Rowan being my old first son now being 23, going on 24, be 24 in a couple of weeks actually. Jesus, how did that happen? Is that allowed? Let's talk to him. Don't discipline him. Stop. Older. But he's now spent more of his life not as a child.
Mm,
He's still quite childlike in some ways, but he, yeah, you've got this kind of 12-year thing. It's not, Asher's out of it now.
I
Again, I'm
know.
sure he's quite childlike.
Right, but he's taller than me. He's
Mm.
got body hair. He looks like a man in a lot of ways. It's crazy.
What do you think is gonna be his future in terms of relationships, and what does he
Yeah.
want with that?
Hmm.
Do you know what he wants? Does he express what he wants, and what do you think are his chances?
I have no idea. He doesn't really talk a lot about, friendships, or I don't know that he's ever talked about romantic relationships.
He's post
So
puberty, so is he expressing a
yeah,
sexuality?
not really, not related to other people at all. I mean, it doesn't really seem like it. No, he hasn't really said anything about ever wanting to go out on a date or like an interest in
And he
anybody.
hasn't
Yeah.
expressed any frustration.
He has not. I don't know if he's totally aware of like how other kids differ from him in that way. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, that's a real blessing. He's sort of
Yeah.
to some degree insulated.
I felt that. Yeah,
But of course, not every special needs child by any means is.
of course.
When people are coming, the mums are coming into you and their boys and their girls
Yeah,
are beginning to express these needs.
yeah.
How do you help them navigate that?
Yeah, there's a whole chapter in my book about puberty that discusses a lot of this. And a lot of it, I think, for parents kind of hinges on independence, right? It's like our kids, depending on their cognition and their needs, they might either want more independence than maybe they're able to have, or yeah, there's just can be that struggle around independence and what that looks like. And obviously, as parents, first and foremost, we want our kids to be safe. And, when you're thinking about things like dating, then it's like consent and the ability to consent and
Sure.
sexuality and sex and all that is so scary. And, how do we
But it has to be addressed.
it absolutely has to be addressed, and there has to be room for it too.
Yes.
Like if your child is able to consent and is interested in romantic relationships, and that is something that we have to be able to allow that for their own
Yeah, sure. It's a human
development.
right. It's a human need.
Exactly. Exactly. And so I think a lot of what I talk about with parents is not so much like how do they go about doing it, but how do they wrestle with their own emotions around it? Because if you
Mm.
spent your whole life taking care of your child and suddenly they want to go out on a date with somebody and everyone's consenting and able to do it, mom might feel like, no, I'm not letting them do it. But she has to work through that instead of, controlling and keeping them close. She has to work through her feelings of letting go and allow that, So I think a lot of it is like, what is the parent feeling? So often it's like very hard to let go of this person that they feel like they have some sense of ownership over. Because at the end of the day, we don't.
Well, but also a sense of responsibility to keep safe too, as you say,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
treading that line is so hard to.
Yes.
It's like,
Yes.
the mother duck pushing the
Yes.
duckling out onto the, of course, no longer a duckling, out of
Right.
water, but knowing that there's alligators swimming around, but at the
That's
same time,
right.
they don't go out on the water, they can't be a duck. That
Yep.
it's this is where I feel tribe and community is so important because
Yeah.
if there is more known familiarity between the people
Hmm.
in the group, then there is also accountability.
That's exactly right. So Asher recently wanted to go to the homecoming dance. He's never done anything like this before. He doesn't have his driver's license, that kind of thing. But Elle, one of the girls I mentioned earlier that does the Zoom sessions with him, he said that he wanted to ask Elle to go to homecoming. So we texted her. She said yes, of course. And I'm thinking about that idea of community because the restaurant that they wanted to go out to, there was a 2-hour wait in order to get in. They didn't have reservations or whatever. But he'd been to that restaurant enough. It's just our corner little bar and grill that they let the kids skip the wait and go in. And just knowing that, like, okay, the servers there know him, our community knows him, even in
Yeah.
Chicago. People know the places that Asher visits, people know Asher. And so there's this sense of community of like, yeah, our tribe, the city, a lot of people that interact with Asher know him and know his limitations and his needs. And just knowing that even when I wasn't there, there were people that had eyes on him. Like that's such a comforting feeling to know that within our community, it has almost a smaller village feel to it in the middle of a huge city with 3 million
Okay,
people.
you're one
But
of those integrated neighborhoods, yeah.
yeah, it feels so good to know that there's people on every corner that know him and know us. That's really special.
He's going to a restaurant. How does he deal with his desire to eat more food than he can?
So I coached Elle before, and that puts her in a difficult position because she's his friend. She's the same age as him. But I said, Asher always orders off the kids menu. That's like one of his things. And so
Okay.
he did that. And I just knew going into it, he's going to finish all of his food. If there's ketchup, he's going to lick the ketchup. He's going to get an apple juice, even though I don't want him to. I'm letting go. It's
Yeah.
fine. It's one night. He's
But
fine.
he not going to want to just keep ordering and keep ordering and keep ordering?
I just knew Elle wouldn't let him.
Okay.
Elle would, like I said, let him order what he orders and, just one thing. And he even like brought our credit card so that he could pay for it, like to be the gentleman and stuff. It was very sweet. So yeah, it was a cool experience. But knowing the community aspect that there very well may have been people in that restaurant that night that even knew him, just people,
Yeah.
regular people eating there. So the importance of community, right?
And his relationship with Elle and the other young woman, he wants to Zoom with them, he wants to spend time with them, but
Yeah.
he's not frustrated or heartbroken that he can't have a relationship with them.
He doesn't seem to be because there's been points where one of them will maybe get a boyfriend or something, and Asher just kind of knows it's like no big deal. He never seems like I've said before, do you have a crush on her? Do you like her? And
Mm,
he's like, no, she's my friend. She's my friend. So I don't know.
yes, it's such a it's such a mystery.
It really is.
This is a hard question to ask.
Hmm.
Can I just ask it straight out?
Hmm.
What's the life expectancy in general with Prader-Willi?
It seems like it can range anywhere from, young to old, but there's no like evidence to say that he will die young.
Is there a sort of bang in the middle prognosis that normally,
So much of it depends on weight
yeah,
and health around that, health
yeah,
around all of that. And so, there's a lot of other things like sleep apnea or things like that that can definitely impact life. But as it stands right now, there's no reason that Asher would not live to be, 60 or 60 years old, give or take.
okay.
Young, young. I mean, we're not talking 80 or
Young
90,
by
but
our
also
standards now, yeah, not
correct,
young by 14th century standards,
correct,
but yeah.
correct. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so I didn't know about sleep apnea. I was going to go somewhere
Hmm.
else for this question, but just talk to me
Yeah, yeah.
briefly about sleep apnea. Why is that a thing with Prader-Willi?
So kind of the main treatment for PWS is growth hormone, the growth hormone injections.
Okay.
And growth hormone can lead to an overgrowth of adenoids and tonsils and all of that. We did
Okay.
get, and so he's been followed for apnea, forever since he's been on the growth hormone. But he does have his adenoids and everything removed, but it's still something frequently that we get sleep studies just to check in on that because that can be a definite concern for people with PWS.
Okay. Good. That's good to know. Okay. So, if, for example, longevity is to a large degree predicated upon weight,
Yeah.
and the best people to probably be in control of that are you and your husband, all the
Yes.
more reason to be the providers of the service of the home that he eventually goes to live in.
Totally.
Because then,
Totally.
yeah, yeah,
I'll be in control of the menu. Like, right,
indeed,
exactly.
indeed.
It's really to that point. Yeah.
So, w- given that that is probably inevitably what you're going to do,
Yeah.
have you been thinking about models like, are you going to form a nonprofit? Are you going to reach out for mentorship? Are there other people already doing this with Prader-Willi that you know who
I don't know
train
any
you?
yeah, I'm not sure. I don't really know anyone else in the PWS community that's doing this, but there are other people even in like the Chicago area that have kids right about the same age that have talked about this as well that are, meeting to sort of discuss what next steps would be. But really it's all very new to me. So I'm like right in the beginning stages of even thinking about all this. So
It
I
would,
guess you are who I'm going to be talking to
yeah, we will
now.
absolutely have that conversation. For anyone who's listening, yes, you need to found a nonprofit,
Yeah.
and that is not a big deal. You can be up and running in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And you are in a unique position in the same way that some of the people I know who are physicians who have autism parents who've started things
Yeah.
are in a unique position because you could run a family practice out of that business.
Yeah.
And for example, Rowan, my son, is now to some degree professionally himself in that he helps me when I'm going around doing particularly movement method trainings. He will
Oh,
talk to the therapists, the caregivers, the parents who are training in our methods about what it is to be autistic from the inside, how it felt to go from the kind of non-verbal, disoriented fog, he calls it the fog, to emerging from that fog and what that process was. A lot of autistic people will talk about this. It's
mm,
really fascinating. What to do to ensure success, why follow the child, blah, blah, blah. And so he's really professionally him.
mm,
And I could see that if you were to do that in the family therapy context with Asher,
mhm.
it's a wonderful thing if Asher comes into the room or Rowan comes to the room, sits
Oh
down for
my
10
gosh.
minutes and says, this is how it is from my point of view.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Amazing.
and then a parent who's perhaps, at the very start of that Mount
Mm,
Everest that they have to climb, can say, well, actually, yeah, oh, wow, okay, that
Yeah.
it's climbable.
Yeah.
That's reassuring.
Yeah.
So I could see you being in a pretty unique position there, and actually
Mm,
being able to come in, not just being a user, but a service provider.
that's right. I love that too, because it's like we all got into this because of our kid, but it's also become a passion to help other parents and other kids in these situations too. So it's, the benefit is there's so much benefit there that we're doing the work that we're doing so that other parents maybe don't have to start from the bottom, or that at least they feel like there's some hope.
Right. Well, and particularly when you've stumbled upon solutions.
Yes.
So when we stumbled upon this thing, and then we realized that it came down to this basic. But then I need to know, why was it working? Why was it working? And
That's right.
then something in the brain and the nervous system. Well, who understands brains and nervous systems? Neuroscientists. So I went and
Right.
spoke to neuroscientists and said, can you explain why this thing that we're doing is working? And they could. And then we realized, oh shit, we could replicate it then.
Right.
Okay, that's good. But I went through a bit of a, do I want to do that? Because as soon as you become a bit of a public figure,
Right.
people are going to throw mud, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, no,
Exactly.
it got to, because there's almost like a moral obligation, because there are so many parents out there who are in the position that I was in 20 years ago,
Yes.
who
Yes.
are not knowing what to do, who haven't gone and met Temple Grandin, and blah,
That's
blah, blah.
right.
And so
That's
we
right.
stumbled into this technology. If we don't make it available, that's not very nice.
Yeah.
There was a bit of a temptation at the beginning to say, why don't we just stay within the family and
Of
keep
course.
quiet, and that would be
Right.
easier. But it wouldn't have been in the long run, because there would have been no community
That's right. That's right.
and no support for him, and no livelihood
Mm-hmm.
for him, and no. So
Mm-hmm.
I do feel actually that generally what I say is, you're in this not only for the rest of your life, you're in this beyond the grave.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to set up these structures. So, okay, let's go.
So
Who am
as
I?
it turns out, our identity is a full
It
circle, because I
is.
started saying I'm not going to find my identity in this, and then here I am.
But that's such an adolescent thing to say, isn't it? It's like, because
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
assumes that one even has an identity,
That's
or that
right.
one has
That's
an
right.
identity that's a fixed thing and
That's
not
right.
endlessly mutable. Because of course, what is
Exactly.
anyway? It's just,
Exactly. And of course, we're going to be changed forever by this experience. It's ingrained in us now.
and I think by parenting in general, let's say special needs wasn't in the picture, you do exist for your children. That
That's
is
right.
just a biological fact. You
Yep.
do. Doesn't mean you can't pursue your own fulfillment, but that's still in service too.
Yep. That's right.
And you actually won't be happy unless it is, because we're just wired that way.
Yep.
But I know that feeling. Yes, that's a very sort of 20s, 30s way to think. So
Totally.
it's like, I'm not going to be, well, that's not going to define me. And it's like, yeah, well.
That was like the first thing out of my mouth. Yeah, no, he has a disability. Yes. Mhm.
But, it brings out the best in us, I think.
Totally. Totally.
You wouldn't be who you are. You wouldn't have written this book.
Exactly.
You wouldn't have become this family therapist.
Yep.
Now, speaking of the book, I'd like you to read a little bit from it, please. All
All
right.
right. Okay. So this has been kind of in the last chapter, which is a chapter all about, it's called A Whole You. And it's all about how we find meaning in this journey.
Okay.
All right. You have your own passions, worldviews, and values. You have lived your own unique life, shaped by experiences from your childhood, culture, religion, and all the other factors of your story, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. Parenting a disabled child very well may be your most life changing experience, but there are many, many other factors that make you who you are. Finding meaning in parenting a disabled child can help you build a bridge from the person you were before your child was born to the person you are now and who you will become. This work can lead you to a choice, reinforce a worldview, make a worldview crumble, or light a fire inside you to create something that makes the world a better place. The question is, who are you? Who is the whole you in light of, not in spite of your role as the parent to a disabled child? Your parenting experience has, no doubt, changed you, but your core self, values, passions, fears, joys, it's all there. And it's important that you give yourself permission to be the whole you as you consider your sense of self and where you find meaning in your life. I'll never dismiss the hard parts of parenting a disabled child, but with the lowest lows come some of the highest highs. When you've spent endless hours in physical therapy with your child, watching them muster up all their strength to tackle a milestone is earth shattering in the best way. Seeing your baby smile, make eye contact, come out of a surgery or seizure, these are the moments where you find real meaning in life. On a larger scale, applying your awareness of disability to your worldview can look like realizing that disability is a normal part of diversity and seeing beauty in all people. This is both simple and revolutionary all at the same time. Being the parent of a disabled child has fundamentally changed the way I view the world. I now understand that all emotions, not just the pleasurable ones, are meant to be part of life. I now know that the goal is not pleasure. The goal is not perfection. What is the goal, you ask? To be present through all of it. There is so much beauty and value scattered throughout the experience of parenting a disabled child. We get to be a companion to our child through all of life's ups and downs. Parenting is the hardest job, but parenting a disabled child with compassion, advocacy, vulnerability, and balance, that's often the hardest job. We are the keepers of our child's life, often responsible for decision making and future planning, and not just for 18 years. It could last 1 year or it could last 60. And if I'm being honest, either option terrifies me. But I can do it, and so can you. Scattered amid the joy and grief, somewhere under all the caretaking and responsibility is you. You're not the same person you were before parenting threw your world upside down. You've changed, but you're in there. You're allowed to be more than just a parent. You're allowed to have complex emotions about your parenting experience and not feel like you have to add the caveat, but I love my child so much, because love and pain can coexist. I've often heard people say something like, take care of yourself, you owe it to your child. But that rhetoric is part of what makes us feel guilty about having complex emotions about parenting. Our child cannot be the sole motivation for our well being. You deserve to be fully whole, a person who feels all the emotions without self judgment, a person who advocates for their child and for themselves. You deserve care, love, and self compassion. Take care of yourself. You owe it to you.
Let's live by. Well, what's the first thing you're going to do for your self-care when we're done with this?
Ooh, I'm gonna go outside here in a little bit and walk in the
Yeah,
snow. It's like
yeah,
30 degrees, but gotta get out there.
yeah. And what are you
Get
going to
out there.
do? What are you going to do for joy while you're out there?
I love just seeing the birds, smelling the smells of the snow, just slowing down for a minute. Just slowing down for a minute. Had a busy day, had a busy
Well, but
week.
what you identified two things there. You're going to go and observe nature.
Yes.
When you go and self-care, is that your first go-to to observe nature?
Yeah, it is. Whether it's outside or inside, my dog,
Yeah,
birds, weather,
yeah,
the leaves,
yeah.
smells. Yeah, nature for me, for sure.
It's so interesting, isn't it? It's the thing that is not talked about in therapy.
Yeah. Yep.
And I remember when I was going through therapy, talk therapy,
Mhm.
and I was thinking, sitting there thinking, wow, I know more about the brain than this person talking to me does, or that I'm talking
Right?
to. I know that sitting here in this chair, in this room, is not gonna do the trick.
Nope.
I need the I need movement for my brain.
Yep.
I need endorphins. I need BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor,
Mhm. Mhm.
neuroplasticity, moving around in nature. I need
Yep.
the habitat that my organism requires in order for its
Mhm.
well-being. And it's so interesting to me. that within the therapy thing, there are people like, I'm a nature therapist,
Right.
but the average therapy that has come out of the sort of 19th century Jungian Freudian psychoanalysis and then on from there only looks at nature in terms of archetypes
Right.
and symbolism.
And does
Because it
therapy in these little
legitimizes it.
rooms with
Well, because
fluorescent
there were
lights.
these like blokes, these academics who like sat in rooms
Yep.
in Vienna,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and obsessed about stuff.
Yep.
But interestingly, the best therapists I've ever come across, human ones, are Kalahari Khoisan Bushman shamans, hunter-gatherer
Mm.
healers living
Yep.
in authentic human way.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the fact that when I asked you the question, what are you going to go do now? You
Mm-hmm.
basically said, I'm going to go out in the snow, observe,
Yeah.
smell the snow and observe the birds.
Yep.
What I'm going to go do, because I'm 6-7 hours ahead of you,
Yeah.
is I'm going to go downstairs and sit by the fire
Yep.
with my children,
Mm-hmm.
which is also nature,
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
and listen to the wind, around the old farmhouse and pet
Love it.
my dog.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also talk to my wife and my children, which is tribe, which is also nature, right?
Yep.
It is simpler, I think, than we think it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it can also be hard to access nature if you're sitting in an apartment in a tower block in Queens or
Yes.
Tokyo. Then, you said also, I like this, nature could be inside too. So
Mm-hmm.
are there plants? Are there natural materials? Do you have a pet?
That's right. That's right.
Are there, yeah, these things are of such paramount importance,
Mm-hmm.
overlooked, but I think sometimes can be the difference between survival and non-survival.
Totally. Totally.
And they bring joy.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, I think people will probably want to contact you and find you. How do they find Dr. Joy? Yeah. Um,
I like that.
and
Yeah, you can.
yeah, tell people how they can reach out to you and get mentorship from you and find your book
Okay.
and all of that.
Yeah, you can find my book really anywhere books are sold online, or if you want to go to your local bookstore and order it. They're in lots of libraries in the United States too. And yeah, you can find me on my website, Amanda Griffith Atkins. That's Griffithatkins.com, AmandaGriffithAtkins.com. And I'm on Instagram at Amanda.Griffith.Atkins. Those are the best ways to find me. Or send me an email. I'm a real person, very accessible.
And I imagine that you do consultancies and things like that over Zoom, long
Yep, I
distance
do
stuff.
parent consultations. And I always like to kind of say it's not like when I'm doing a parent consultation, it's not a how-to parent. I'm not that kind of therapist that's going to tell you how to raise your child. I'm more going to tell you how to take care of yourself while you're raising
Yeah.
your child. So keep that in mind
Yeah.
too. I'm all about
Yeah.
the parent. Yeah.
And I would like to collaborate with you. I was leading a retreat this year in Sweden.
Mm.
The wilds of Sweden is amazing. And one of the people who was on it is a fellow special needs parent. And she started talking, her daughter's in her 30s, and began talking about the long-term trauma
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
the accumulated trauma of being a special needs parent, that
Yeah.
particularly sort of when they get much older and you're now dealing with that kind of tiredness
Yeah.
because you've been in it 2-3 decades by then.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm realizing that in our work we don't yet have that program.
Yeah.
So
Let's
maybe
do it.
I thought should we do it?
Let's do it.
Okay. We'll bring Leanna in as well.
Yes. Yes. Oh,
And
Leanna.
lads, listeners, if you're listening to this, you've got to go check out the Live Free Ride Free with Leanna Tank, because
Yes.
rad. And we
Oh,
wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't for Leanna.
yeah. Yeah. I love Leanna.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. What a
Yeah.
gift.
Yeah, likewise. I look forward to the continuing conversation.
Yep. Take care.
You too.
Bye.
Bye. Go enjoy the snow. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you did, please help us to make more. Please like, subscribe, tell a friend, give us a thumbs up. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, please go to my website, rupertisaacson.com. And if you'd like to find out about our certification courses with autism, education, horsemanship, everyday shamanism, there's a whole range of cool stuff. Putting a show together like this is not an easy task. If you'd like to support us, please consider going to our Patreon page and showing us some love there. Even the smallest donation, it really helps us to keep the good content coming. So go to rupertisaacson.com and click on the Patreon link. Not to mention our excellent merch. Please go to our shop and check out some of our really cool rock and roll themed merch, t-shirts, hoodies, all that sort of thing. rupertisaacson.com. It's all there. I can't wait for our next guest and also to meet you there. In the meantime, remember, live free, ride free.